everyone, I'm Megan Shane, and I'm the Scrum Master of the Marketing and Training team for DH Leonard Consulting and Agile Nonprofits. I'm joined here today again with our product owner, Diane Leonard, and Jessica Crowley. Hi, ladies.
Hello.
So I was hoping that today we can continue our conversation about our bookshelves and talk about a few more books you're passionate about. Jessica?
Yes, so today I picked a 3-part series that I really like. And this is actually, I'll zoom in so you can see it, but this is the Addison Wesley Signature Series. And the first book in that series that I recommend is this book called Scrum Essentials. And so this book is actually a practical guide to the most popular Agile process, which is Scrum. So there's a beautiful overview in here that I like about the Scrum framework, and it walks through the roles, the artifacts, and the events in Scrum. And I think the illustrations are really interesting. There's over 200 in each one of these books that I'm about to recommend. There's a section on portfolio planning, which I really like. I find a lot of books don't dive into what has to happen at the portfolio so that the Scrum teams are empowered. And this book has a lot of great illustrations about how to handle portfolio level planning. So the other section I like is this section about organizational depth, because that's one of the complexities that can occur when you start prioritizing work and working through a backlog. So there's a lot of tips on how to handle organizational debt with your Scrum teams. So this first book, Scrum Essentials, I highly recommend that book for you to get started reading about the Scrum framework. The second book in the series that I would recommend is the Scrum Field Guide. This book is for your first year and it goes beyond. And there's 3 particular sections that I find very interesting. The first section is about release planning and how you can use today's velocity and your most likely, your most optimistic, and your least likely velocities to get a trend on whether or not you're going to meet your release plan that you developed for your backlog. Another section that I find really interesting is this project estimation section. It talks all about how to get project costing. It goes into a lot of detail about the formulas and how to handle the complexities of dedication levels of your team members. And then the final section I recommend in this book is this prioritizing your backlog. It talks about the different ways you can prioritize it, how tips and tricks for how you can get started today, leaning out your backlog, prioritizing it, and very helpful tips both for the Scrum Master and the product owner in that book. Last but not least, this is the book that I use a lot as an Agile coach. It's about Agile coaching for teams, and it actually gets into the product level as well as the portfolio level. The first thing I like about this book is the Agile coaching styles. So everyone has unique styles, and this teaches you to play many different roles and to know when to use those different types of styles. This also talks a lot about the differences between teaching person-to-person, individual level coaching, and doing it with a whole team. You have to use different styles when you teach for those different audiences. And then roles in conflict. Agile coaches, Scrum Masters, we become masters of being able to coach people through conflict. And so these 3 tips in this book, I highly recommend you taking a look at and reading today. These are my 3 books.
Those are awesome. And you know what, Jess, as you were sharing those different points out of the book that you really like, the thing that came to mind, because we've talked about this offline from the video, about organizational debt versus technical debt and what sort of language you find in a lot of the Scrum and Agile books. And many of them talk about technical debt. But to nonprofits, usually we're thinking more about organizational debt. And then I went one step further when you said that. I'm like, oh, let's make sure folks know that we're not talking about your financial statements and what that looks like for your debt. We're not talking about your balance sheet. We're talking about what happens in teams when you create things. So I think that section of the book, that's a really powerful thing for nonprofits to dig in on. I mean, out of the whole series, it's all great, but I think that's something that a lot of nonprofits need to have deeper understanding of. And that's a great book for it. So thank you for those 3. I think I'm gonna have to make some more space in my bookshelf, or just maybe add a second level. So let me show you what I grabbed today. So last time when we talked about books, we were looking at J.J. Sutherland's field book, his guide. And I thought, well, we need to go a little old school, because what was the book that got me started thinking about Scrum, learning more about Agile? The Red Book. Absolutely. The Art of Doing Twice the Work in Half the Time by Dr. Jeff Sutherland. Yeah, absolutely. This was it. And this one, it's got amazing stories and case studies to get you engaged. But this book, I didn't first buy it as a hard copy, which is my preference for business-related books, but rather it was a debate between my spouse and I. What were we going to listen to while we went on a road trip, a long road trip with our 2 young children? And so being an Enneagram Type 3 and a Type A, well, he knew that this title, Doing Twice the Work in Half the Time, was going to hook me. And so indeed, it is. It's the book that I credit with getting it all started for us here at Agile and Nonprofits. It is an important foundation for understanding, and honestly, it's a fun read. It's a great audiobook though too, even though I usually like the hard copy. It was one that was really actually a lot of fun to listen to. So that's a great one. And actually we've given it away at some conferences before, and it's what we often talk about in our book club. We've used that as the foundation to our Agile and Nonprofits book club. So we've had a lot of fun sharing the idea of twice the work in half the time. So the next book I grabbed off my bookshelf is a new one for me. So recently, when I became a licensed Scrum trainer, I was talking about psychological safety in the retrospective section. And a fellow new licensed Scrum trainer with me mentioned the book that actually was where psychological safety came from, The Fearless Organization. This was written by Amy Edmondson and the colleague of mine. It's his colleague that wrote the book. And I love talking about psychological safety when we think about retrospectives, when we think about the way in which we create an environment where our teams can thrive. And I find that nonprofits really love this idea. They're caring for their communities. They like to care for each other as colleagues. And so talking about a psychologically safe environment to do this work, often really hard work to support their communities, it resonates with them, really hits them in their heart. And so this is a great book to help give the understanding behind why we talk about psychological safety. So a great one to add. It came in straight from my shipping order and I started reading it right away. It's a fantastic one. Also relatively new to my bookshelf. This one's a little thicker. I'll be honest, it's going to take a few cups of coffee, not just one. So when we talk about Scrum patterns, books are like patterns, what are we talking about here? So a Scrum book, this book here, it lays out the patterns that have been proven to help high-performing teams. And there's a whole website, it's Scrum Plop. You know, it's a mouthful. Scrum Plop is where you can go to read about the patterns online, and it's a free open source site. But if we want to have a book on hand in the bookshelf, because sometimes I'll get a question and I'll just want to quick flip through the table of contents, not necessarily refer someone to a website, this book has, let me just show you, it has a huge table of contents in it with all these different areas you might need help. You might say, I'm trying to think about that team environment. I'm trying to think about product backlog items. I'm trying to think about retrospectives. You can quickly zoom right in through the table of contents, go to the one section, it's going to be 3 or 4 pages that's going to give you maybe a case study or a story, an example to think about it. And I was using this just the other day. We love to talk about sustainable pace. We love to talk about self-care. And nonprofit professionals, they're so passionate about their work that they don't always take all their vacation time. They don't always take time for themselves. They're so worried caring about their community, which is amazing. But vacation, whether it's a staycation or you're going somewhere, it doesn't matter. It's really important for that self-care, and so thinking about sustainable pace. But how, as a Scrum team, do you address it? So that came up actually in our team, our writing team, and I thought, what does that look like for a team that's been together for a while, that's high performing? I wonder what our Scrum book says here about it. And indeed, there's a whole 5-page section about it, and it gave some really good tactical advice that our Scrum Master could think about. So I love it, and it helps me constantly think about new ways that we can support our own teams as well as our clients. So like I said, slightly thicker book, a few more cups of coffee to get through it, but definitely earned a right on this very crowded bookshelf. Whew. I know I'm going to need more coffee after that much reading, right, Megan?
All right, thank you so much, ladies. And I know she mentioned the upcoming book club, so make sure you check out our upcoming book club schedule, and I'll link that below. Thank you so much and have a great day.